Welcome back, everybody. I've had a lot of people DM me on Twitter and Facebook, and they asked me to do a reaction to this video called NHL Top Conspiracy Theories in League History by Alyssa Hope that was put out May 14th, 2020. Let me know if you guys are interested in seeing more reaction videos like this, if you guys have suggestions for any other videos you'd like to see me react to. I'm going to go ahead and react to this video, and I want to see what it's about, and I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions on it. And if you're interested in seeing more of this, let me know below. All right, I have not watched this before, so I'm going to go ahead and see what this video is all about. Again, top conspiracy theories in league history. So you'll be getting the thoughts from your favorite conspiracy theorist here.
Conspiracy theories. Just about anyone can get down with a hot take or theoretical explanation for the seemingly unexplainable.
We went to the moon in 1969.
And even within the small realm of sports, specifically hockey, there's quite a few for the taking. While I'm definitely not believing that this is the be-all, end-all, it's always fun to dissect and try to explain events that defied all odds. In this video, I'm going to go over a few of the biggest conspiracy theories in league history. And with that, here are the top 3 NHL conspiracies to date. Usually, for most teams joining the league, the Stanley Cup final would be the furthest thing from their mind coming in. But for the Vegas Golden Knights in 2017, it was definitely on theirs. After the franchise commenced in Sin City, they began turning heads with their remarkable start to the season, while playing with a chip on their shoulders and a motivation from within following the tragedy that took place.
And remember, that's what we had said before the season began. I'm going to link the video I put out on the 2017-2018 Washington Capitals rigged Stanley Cup victory over the Vegas Golden Knights, because what we had said before the season began was that the Vegas shooting happened on October 1st, 10/1, right before the start of the 101st season of the NHL. And the shooter, Stephen Paddock, remember, his name in the most pure cipher sums to 64. Golden Knights sums to 64. And that season was the Capitals' 44th season in the NHL. Remember, shooting, kill, cancer, chemo, military, officer, trooper, infantry, mask, they all summed to 44. And I said right there, boom, there's your Stanley Cup final. And we had talked about why Washington was going to win 4-1, winning the Cup on June 7th, the date written 7/6. Talked about all of that before the season began. We nailed Vegas. Vegas had 100-1 odds to win the Western Conference. And a ton of people made a ton of money because we guaranteed this was in the bag for Vegas to win the Western Conference and the Capitals to win the Cup. But she's not going to talk about that, I bet.
Placed in the heart of Las Vegas, the team was largely led by names like Marc-Andre Fleury, Derek Engelland, and Jonathan Marchessault, which all became affectionately known as the Golden Misfits. Misfits that would become the most successful first-year franchise in the history of professional sports, finishing with a 51-24-7 record.
And remember, before the season began, that was another tell that we had talked about. I had said Vegas expect them to be the first expansion team in 51 years to reach the Stanley Cup final. They won exactly 51 games in the regular season. The word conspiracy in the most pure cipher sums to 51. Think about Area 51, which is also in Nevada, just like Las Vegas.
The Knights continued to conquer throughout the playoffs en route to reach the Stanley Cup Finals. So how did this Cinderella story really come about, as many teams have now spent,
or you could just watch my video on it that's linked in the description,
decades in the league without a single sniff at the 4th round? How did a slew of players their teams willingly gave up on come together with the odds stacked against them? It's been theorized by many speculators that the 2017 expansion draft wasn't exactly legit, as players such as James Neal, who put up 41 points, or Jonathan Marchessault, who had 30 goals scored before being shipped to Vegas, made the roster seemingly seem much better than it should have been. A direct result of, theoretically, the overpayment.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that people should think about, right? The NHL teams should have protected their best players. How does an NHL team let go a guy like Jonathan Marchessault, who just scored 30 goals? With your team scoring 30 goals in today's NHL, that's a huge deal. You know, why would you ever let a young guy who had that kind of potential, why would you let him go? You know, the Pittsburgh Penguins let go of Marc-Andre Fleury, a former number 1 overall pick who's going to be in the NHL Hall of Fame someday. That's why people in the truth community that were even doubting Vegas would be there as an expansion team, I said, you guys don't get it, man. They got a Hall of Fame goaltender. They got a Hall of Fame caliber player at the most important position in hockey. That would be equivalent to an expansion NFL team having, you know, a Hall of Fame quarterback that they could have under center in their first season. You know what I mean? Again, James Neal, a guy who was a former 40-goal scorer in the NHL. Those guys should have absolutely been protected by their teams, but they weren't, because because they had it scripted for Vegas to be in the Stanley Cup final, and they needed to make them seem legit. And that's why they gave up those players that otherwise they should have never got. You know? I mean, again, you just have to use common sense and critical thinking. But anyway, let's continue.
That Bill Foley, the team's owner, gave the league of $500 million as a quote-unquote expansion fee, which was over 6 times more than Columbus and Minnesota paid close to 20 years before. Sure, inflation's a thing, but America didn't suddenly become a third-world country. Even still, with Seattle's expansion ticket price even higher at $650 million, if they win the Stanley Cup in their inaugural season, well, this theory wasn't too far off.
Seattle's not going to win the Stanley Cup this year. We already got those videos out on Patreon talking about who's going to win the Stanley Cup over who and why. So this is a good one, too. This is something I'm going to have to make a video about, the Wayne Gretzky trade from Edmonton to L.A. Remember, this happened on August 9th, 1988. Peter Pocklington, his full name, Peter Hugh Pocklington, the owner of the Oilers, his name sums to 89. He traded Gretzky on 8/9. They called him Canada's favorite son, leaving Canada for the United States. 89's the 24th prime number. Canada sums to 24. As well as the fact that, remember, Wayne Gretzky, his full name, or Wayne Gretzky's name sums to 144 and 54, just like Jesuit order. August 9th is the day leaving 144 days left in the year. There's a whole lot more to the Gretzky trade. I'm gonna have to make a video about this trade, but yeah, we'll see what she talks about here. But there's a lot to this Gretzky trade, and it was all by the numbers.
The Great One, regarded by most as the greatest player to have ever played the game. And by the late 80s.
And I mean, honestly, if you know anything about hockey, Wayne Gretzky is not even a good player. I mean, if you watched Gretzky, I mean, seriously, how many times was he just behind the net? He just passed it to somebody wide open in front of the net. And they just score because nobody knows how to play defense. How many times Gretzky would just get a breakaway and just do a simple forehand, backhand deke, and the goalie would be like on the other side of the net. It's like, what the fuck? They're doing shit. The goalies would be doing shit that I was taught never to do as a 12-year-old playing roller hockey. You know? I mean, seriously, Gretzky would come in over the blue line and shoot a slap shot, and it would go right in. It's like, what the fuck? I mean, seriously, you look at Wayne Gretzky. That dude cannot skate. He could not skate like Nathan MacKinnon. He can't shoot like Alex Ovechkin. He couldn't stick handle like Patrick Kane. I mean, that guy was a total no talent and a complete manufactured superstar. Just like Tom Brady in the NFL, a guy with no athletic ability, can't run, can't scramble, can't get out of the pocket, yet somehow nobody can ever sack him. Nobody knows how to defend a screen pass. His receivers are always wide open. You know, it's a joke. Gretzky was a joke just like Tom Brady, if you know anything about hockey. But anyway, yeah, let's continue.
In Edmonton, number 99 had already led the Oilers to 4 Stanley Cup championships. Alongside other hockey greats of the era, like Messier and Coffey, Gretzky had cemented his legacy in Alberta, where he would remain. Or, at least, that's what many thought. As the day of August 9th, 1988 rolled around, the hockey world was at a loss for words, with cameras zooming into a flood of tears that were on full display from the captain. As much of Canada was at a standstill, this definitely wasn't what anyone expected. Everyone, except maybe a few. As Gretzky was sent to Los Angeles, he immediately birthed a new love of hockey into the City of Angels, and quickly drummed up interest, with the arena at the time, the Forum, being at max capacity seemingly every game, with many celebrities and even the late President Ronald Reagan making their way over to see Gretzky. Things were looking much better for the team that previously struggled to get past the very team their soon-to-be captain was from. And the supposed man behind the curtain pulling the strings was Oilers owner Peter Pocklington, the same man that had initially inquired about swapping markets with Toronto for the possible return. And the return for the Great One, as you'd expect, was immense. 2 players, 3 first-round draft picks, and $15 million all went to the Oilers in return. But was he really only motivated by the dollar signs? Is a question that many for decades.
And if you know anything about this trade, if you remember back, Peter Pocklington is a billionaire. And supposedly he was in all kind of financial problems with the Oilers, and he needed to trade Gretzky for all those draft picks, the 2 players, and $15 million. How does a billionaire need $15 million? I mean, does that make any sense? The whole story makes no sense. A billionaire needs money to reseed his team. It's like, what? I mean, is that a conspiracy theory or is that critical thinking?
Have pondered. One question that may never really be answered. But coincidentally or not, the 2 owners involved in the trade were both later charged with bankruptcy fraud, and the Kings owner, Bruce McNall, also with wire fraud and conspiracy. Regardless, as far as...
So if they both actually got charged for bank fraud and McNall with wire fraud, how's that a conspiracy if that actually happened? I don't know. You tell me.
As this conspiracy goes, it seemed to be fruitful on both ends. At least, initially anyway.
Yes. Another video I should make in the future. Yep. Sidney Crosby getting picked number 1 overall by the Pittsburgh Penguins. What a perfect script this was. But I'm going to let her talk, and then I'm going to show you what really happened here.
2004. The draft that rendered many high-caliber players such as Alex Ovechkin and Evgeny Malkin. But what if I were to tell you that Pittsburgh was actually statistically supposed to get Ovechkin instead of DC? That's right, as the Penguins had strayed very far from the Stanley Cup winning teams of 91 and 92, as they finished dead last in the league with the worst record at 58 points. And it was actually Chicago that had the second highest odds to land the grade 8 over the Capitals, with Pittsburgh rightfully first. But as the draft came and went in Carolina, the hockey world was shocked at the top 3 selections, as Ovechkin ended up placing a Caps jersey over his head instead of that of the Penguins or even Blackhawks. Now we all know how things in Chicago turned out with Kane and Taves. But for Pittsburgh, at least in 2004 anyway, things weren't looking great. Sure, they did get a great asset in Evgeny Malkin, who would become one of the greatest hockey players in franchise history, but Gino had an ongoing contract dispute that would set his debut season back quite a bit. And then the inevitable happened, as the NHL lockout, the first one in 2 decades, came about, and lasted the entire tentative season. And without getting too far into that mess, the lockout did do one thing to greatly benefit Pittsburgh in the end. It granted them the highest odds for the second time in a row of selecting the first overall pick.
Okay, to clarify, Pittsburgh did not have the highest odds to get Sidney Crosby. The way it worked was the NHL had the draft lottery at the time where 16 teams had 1 ball, and whatever team got the winning ball was the one that got Crosby. So 16 teams had the opportunity with 1 ball. There were 10 teams that had 2 balls in there. And there were only 4 that had 3 balls, because at the time it was only a 30-team league. And those teams were the Sabres, the Blue Jackets, the Rangers, and the Penguins. So all 4 of those teams had the same odds to win Sidney Crosby. But I'm going to show you why that. But I'm going to tell you why this was rigged for Crosby in a second. For those of you that have been longtime followers of the channel, you already know what I'm going to say. But let's continue.
A projected first overall pick that had Wayne Gretzky's interest peaked at only 14, who would soon after rival.
Okay, I just want to say Wayne Gretzky, right? Wayne Gretzky's interest was piqued by Crosby. Wayne Gretzky in the most pure cipher sums to 63. All 4 of those teams, the Penguins, the Rangers, the Blue Jackets, and the Sabres, because they had 3 balls in the draft, all 4 of them had 6.3% odds of getting Crosby. Talk about a mockery.
Great Ones record in the QMJHL after shattering a franchise one at 16, the next one, Sidney Crosby. As the draft date rolled around, it became very clear that the 2005 draft would truly be one of a kind. The draft itself, that had its date and location changed due to the circumstances of the lockout, was held in July at the Westin Hotel in Ottawa. And the biggest change to the regular format was how the order would come about. Instead of the order we're quite used to today, this one relied a lot more on chance, rather than certainty. Dubbed as the Sidney Crosby sweepstakes, the final say in where the best draftee seemed since Gretzky would go was based on these lottery balls. And these minute pieces of plastic had assumed the power to decide fate, as the 4 teams that were given 3 had to meet the following criteria. They hadn't qualified for
Okay, so she did say the 4 teams that had 3. Okay, I didn't know if she was going to say that or not.
Playoffs for the past 3 playable seasons, and had also not received a first overall pick following the postseason's end. Therefore, if Pittsburgh had received Ovechkin, the lockout didn't happen, or this particular format wasn't decided.
I can show you that draft too, the 2004 draft, and how that was rigged for the Capitals to get Ovechkin.
The player most responsible for bringing multiple championships to the Steel City wouldn't have been given the chance to rectify the franchise's current predicament. A predicament that was so great that the possibility before this draft, and even shortly after, of Pittsburgh relocating was pretty high. Losing seasons, dwindling ticket sales, and Lemieux not being able to play all but only 10 games in the 2003-2004 season was all predicting what many thought was the writing on the wall. But instead of tanking, Pittsburgh...
And again, does that seem like a coincidence, right? Penguins basically filing bankruptcy, dwindling attendance, losing seasons, and then they just happen to land the next great prodigy. I mean, does that seem like a coincidence to you? And remember, that was one of the first things I used to always thought was really fishy about the NHL growing up as like an 8, 9, 10-year-old. Back in the day, if you remember, back in the 80s and the early 90s, the 2 best players in the world were Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky, who played for the Edmonton Oilers and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then I was like, look at that. Now Pittsburgh got Sidney Crosby, and then you look at what just happened a few years ago. The Edmonton Oilers got Connor McDavid. And I'm like, look at that. Connor McDavid plays for the Edmonton Oilers, Sidney Crosby for the Pittsburgh Penguins, like how Wayne Gretzky played for the Edmonton Oilers and Mario Lemieux played for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And God, it never fails, right? Never fails.
The franchise that needed him most had the odds in their favor this time around, and the minuscule 6.3 chance that they would win.
And again, the reason why they won it with the 6.3% chance was because Sidney Crosby, his full name, Sidney Patrick Crosby, sums to 92. Pittsburgh Penguins sums to 92. They won the Cup in 92. They also won the Cup in the 92nd season of the NHL. And keep in mind as well, he wears the number 87, right? National Hockey League sums to 87. He became the face of the National Hockey League. He was born in 87 on 8/7. He has an $8.7 million annual salary with Pittsburgh. I'm not sure where the conspiracy theory comes in at.
Land, said the kid, turned out to be just enough in the end.
Okay, so I guess that's the end of the video. Let me know if you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see more videos like this, I'll talk to you guys soon. Till next time.